Okay, so we are at the top of base Omid base 2B. Nope, nobody. Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Okay, good. Okay, so just to recap, we saw with the Machlokus of Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah in relation to a sukkah that is higher than 20 amos, about 30 foot. Says the Tanna Kama Pasula that it's possible. Says Rabbi Yehuda, Makshe, he said it's kosher. It's kosher. Then we saw three opinions in relation to why, from three Amarayim, as to what the machlokus, the basis of the machlokus between Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda are. Just to recap, the first one is Rabbah. Okay, this is Rabbah. Based on the pasuk, "Laman yedu dorosichem ki basukoso shavtes b'nei Yisrael bo itzios ameretz Yisrael mani Hashem Elokeichem." Yeah, in order that your generation shall know that I caused the Jewish people to come out of Egypt. Sorry, to dwell in sukkahs when they took them out of Egypt. I am Hashem your God. Yeah. So what does Rabbah say about this? Laman yedu. Yeah, you need to know. He says you need to know that I commanded the Yidden in the midbar to dwell in the sukkahs. How will you know? The only way to know is by seeing the schach. If the schach is higher than 20 amos, you won't see it. Therefore, you won't know. Therefore, you haven't fulfilled the man yedu. Okay, that's Rabbah. Second opinion, Rabbi Zera. Says Rabbi Zera, the sukkah tiyeh letzel. It quotes a passage from Yeshayahu, from Isaiah. The sukkah tiyeh letzel yomam mechorev mechaltzem mitzvah mizerem mitzvah. The sukkah shall serve it shall serve as a sukkah for shade from heat by day and a shelter for protection against drenching. So he said this idea of tzel, that the sukkah has to provide, or the schach has to provide shade. If not, it doesn't have the din of a sukkah. In what circumstance would it not provide shade? When it's too high, because then it's the walls that are shading you from the sun and not the sukkah. Okay, that's Rabbi Zera. And the third opinion is from Rava. It says Rava, Basukot, Basukot Teshu Shivas Yamim Kolesach Viso Yeshu Basukos. In sukkahs they shall dwell, or you shall dwell for 7 days. All the citizens of Israel shall dwell in sukkahs. Rava is of the opinion that it could have said Shivash Yamim Teshu Basukos. Could have said it this way around: Shivash Yamim, 7 days. Basukos Teshu, dwell in sukkahs. The fact that it put Basukos Teshu Shivash Yamim is almost like the adjective for sukkahs. What type of sukkahs are they? They're sukkahs of 7 days, which is temporary. Arai and not keva, and therefore, if you make your sukkah keva, if you make it permanent, then it's not basukos teshu, and then you don't have this idea of shivas yamim, and therefore anything about if it's 20 amos and above, it is by definition keva, because you cannot make a sukkah that tall without making it in a more permanent way.
I like the prompt, Rabbi. Very, very good.
Thank you. I learned from Reb Eli.
I was going to say, it looks, put you on YouTube as well.
I'm going to send this. Can you take a still of this? So you can show. I want this one. It's a really good one. The good one. I've done it in different colours. Someone take a still of that. Jeremy got my phone. Take a picture of it. So I can send it to him saying, look, inspiration.
You could get him to appear here at the shul, couldn't you, for one of these lessons?
Yeah, for the next Siyum, he's gone. Okay, so we scored, having got the three in front of us. Hi Paul. Perfect timing. So we've got Rabbi Zera, and we've got Rava, all offering three different pasukim to explain why a sukkah which is higher than 20 amos is possible. Now, the question: why do we need three pasukim? Why can't Rabbi and Rabbi Zera and Rava agree on one pasuk? They agree that there's no dispute about halacha. They agree. Everybody, they're saying we hold like the Tanna Kama that a sukkah which is higher than 20 amos is possible. Says Rabbi, that's because you need to know that you're dwelling in the sukkah, and it that's too high, you don't know. Rabbi Zera would say you need the schach to give you shade, and if it's that high, it's the walls give you shade, not the schach. Rava would say because it has to be arai, temporary, and not keva. Anything high, if it's 20 amas, it would be keva, and it wouldn't be arai. Why couldn't they have got together and said, let's pick a pasuk? Yeah, we agree on the halacha. There's no dispute on that, but we all say 20 amas is possible, like the Tanakama. Why can't we agree on a pasuk?
Did they all live in the same place, Rabbi?
Sorry?
Did they all live in the same place? And did they all sit around the base of Mikdash together?
That I don't know, but I mean, they're all in Bavel.
Okay, no, but as in for them to all pick a pasuk, we need to have some kind of...
Bavel. Whether contain, I mean, it was a theoretical question, really.
Oh, I see.
That why didn't they, and not necessarily why didn't they get together, but why did they all choose different pasukim?
Okay.
Why couldn't they agree on the pasuk? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
If they didn't conclude, why don't they say, Moses? We could say Moses Rabba we could say that Rabba would agree with Rabbi Zera on X pasuk, or yeah. So why do they each of them bring a different pasuk? That's really in a nutshell the next part of the Gemara from the top of Ahmed's base, page 4. Says the Gemara, Kulhu karaba lo amri. All of them, meaning says Rashi on the left hand side, Hanach Amorai, these Amoraim, teachers of the Gemara, and we're talking here about Rabbi Zera and Rava. So Rabbi Zera and Rava can't say like Rabba. Why? Oh, can you see it? Yeah, move out of the way. Shall I turn it around? I'll turn it around. Just put it in the order, that's all. So Rabbi Zera and Rava. So says the Gemara, let's take Rabbi first. Rabbi Zera and Rava. It's not as easy as it makes it look, you see. True, yes, arms, yes, Jewish arms. Yeah. They can't say, so Rabbi Zera and Rava can't say like Rava. Why? Lo amri hahu yadir ledoros he, because they would argue that the pasuk that Rava chose, when it says laman yedu doro seichem, seems quite clear. What's it referring to? The doros, for the generations. In order that your generation should know, what should they know? That I cause the Jewish people to dwell in sukkahs. It's a historical lesson. Yeah, it's about passing on heritage. It's not about halacha. It's not about how the sukkah should look. It's about they should know about it. Look at Rashi. Top line of the Rashi on the left-hand side. Second Rashi. Karabba lo amri. So Rabbi Zera and Rava can't hold like Rabba. So Yalef milam an yedu, who derives it from the pasuk of man yedu. Hahu, because love biyadir di yeshiva sukkah ka'ama. Because this pasuk isn't talking about knowing you're dwelling now in a sukkah. On sukkahs every year, you need to know that you're dwelling in a sukkah. Ella b'yedias doros havan. But rather it comes to tell us for the future generations. The Torah is saying future generations need to be made known that Heikef Sukkos Anane Kavod Hanasel Avos, that God surrounded the Jewish people in the clouds of glory. Those were the sukkahs, not the sukkahs mamish, but the Anehana Kavod, the clouds of glory. That's what God surrounded the Jewish people with in the desert in order to protect them. So that's what that pasuk is talking about. Therefore, they can't say, oh, we can learn the requirement of less than 20 amas from this pasuk, because this pasuk is a history lesson, not a halachic lesson. Okay? History, halacha, right? So says the Gemara, okay. Carry on in the Gemara then. So that's why Rabbi Zera and Rava have to come with their own pesukim. However, we could still, what about why can't Rava and Rabbi Zera get together? Says the Gemara. Dorothy, second line. Rabbi Zera nami lo amri hahu. Whereas now, when it comes to Rabbi Zera, Rabba and Rava can't accept his posuk. Hahuli Moshe Mashiach. Because Rabbi Zera's posuk is talking about in the future. This is not from Torah. This is from Yeshayahu. This is from the Nevi'im. This is from prophets. What is the prophet saying? V'sukkah hayasa, v'sukkah tiye letzeil yamim. Yeah, that the sukkah should be for shade. What we're talking about in the times of Mashiach. Yeah, the Jewish people will live during a time of tranquility and peace, and they'll be shaded from the extremes of hot and cold, wet, from rain, was it say, protection against drenching rain, so the shade during the day and protection for drenching rain. It's talking about also the future. So the future, not halacha. Look at Rashi, third line of Rashi, Yemos HaMashiach. Osam sukkos yeletzel le'oneg. The sukkos this pasuk is talking about is not halachic sukkos on Sukkot, Chag HaSukkot itself, on the festival, but it's talking about the people will have these summer homes. They will have these lovely, wonderful booths they'll be able to build in their back gardens that will protect them for enjoyment, le'oneg, for enjoyment, not to fulfill the mitzvah sukkah, but merely just to give them shade in the summer. And that's what the Shulchan Aruch says. That that sukkahs really should be in the summer, should be in the spring, summer, when we came out. Why? We came out of Mitzrayim. When did we come out of Mitzrayim? Spring, summertime. Therefore, sukkahs should really be. We really should be eating our matzah in the sukkah. You've heard me say this now. Yeah, we really should be eating our matzah in the sukkah. Why don't we? Well, let's say Shulchan Aruch say, because if we did it in the spring, summer, that's the time everybody goes. It's hot weather. Everyone goes out of their houses and they go into their booths. They go into their summer homes, and they in order to be shaded from the heat. Therefore, it wouldn't be clear we're doing it for the sake of the mitzvah, and therefore that's why sukkahs has to be in the rainy season, particularly in this country, but a bit more in the autumn winter time, in order that it's clear that everyone else is coming in from their summer homes. We're going out into them. Yeah. So this pasuk is not talking about halachic requirements that it should give you shade. It's talking about that, please God, in the time of the future, we will live in such times of relaxation. Will be, our enemies will be gone. That we can use it. We can build these sukkahs. Let's sell. Fourth line of Rashi. Le'oneg, and also to protect us. Aval sukkahs mitzvah einu letzel. But you can't learn anything from this about the sukkah, the mitzvah of sukkah, the sukkah you need for your mitzvah, giving you shade. That's not what this pasuk is coming for. And that's why Rava and Rabba can't accept Rabbi Zera. Okay. Look at Tosafos on the right-hand side. Do you remember there was a challenge to Rabbi Zera? A buyer changed the challenge to go back to Amud Aleph. About 3/4 of
the steel walls.
Sorry?
The steel wall challenge.
No. Ashros Kanayim. So, Rabbi Zera said the ikka is that it's the schach that gives you shade, right? We've learned from that pasuk from Yeshayahu that the sukkah has to give you shade. Amalei Abaye, it's about 10 lines up from the bottom, more than that, 2, 4, 6, about 15 lines up from the bottom, middle of the line. Amalei Abaye. I'll hold it up for you. Middle of the line, there's 2 dots. Yeah. Oh, you haven't got that. Here you go. Here you go. Amalei Abaye. So Abai says to him, according to what you're saying, Rabbi Zera, that it's the schach that has to give you shade, and if it doesn't, because it's above 20 amos, you're not fulfilled your obligation of sukkah. Then what happens if you build your sukkah in the shadow of these mountains, in the mountain range, in the valley, where there's never going to be, because there's a natural block to it? So Haki says, you also wouldn't have a sukkah. So Amalei said to them, Hasam dal ashros kanayim ikar sel sukkah. He said, if you were to remove the mountains, then it would be the schach that was giving you shade, in theory. So theoretically, what we're talking about is the schach has to have the potential to give you shade, even though there may be skyscrapers or mountains that in practice stop you having shade. As long as the sukkah is made in such a way that if that impediment was removed, it would be the schach that was giving you the shade and not the walls. That's fine. Yeah.
Otherwise, Danny's saying it would be able to do the sukkah.
Yeah. In Canary Wharf. Yeah. 100%. So it says Tosfos. Look, so we could have said, the Gemara could have said the reason why Rabba and Rava don't accept Rabba Zera is because they hold like a buyer and say, well, what about a sukkah that's built in the shadow of Ashros Kanayim? Yeah. So says Tosfos, Rabbi Zera lo Amri, they don't hold like Rabbi Zera. Not because they accept the challenge of a buyer about, well, according to what you're saying, then any sukkah that's built and it's naturally shaded by other things, we can't accept it. That's not what they say. It's because Amma al Rabba Mishum de Rabbi Zera Shanila Abaya Shapir. The truth is they accept when Rabbi Zera rebuts a buyer's question by saying, well, if we were to remove the mountains, then as long as the schach would then provide the shade, that's fine. Even though in practice it might not, because it's shaded by the mountains. If you were to remove them, it would. Rabba and Rava accept that's answer, and therefore they don't see that as a challenge to him. Their challenge is that this posuk is not talking about halacha; it's talking about the future. Yeah, and therefore you can't use. Therefore they can't use it. They have to find something else. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. Now the next question is.
So why do they think it's future?
Because it's a posuk in Yeshayahu. First, it's the Navi. First, it's the prophet speaking, and he's saying that the sukkah should be for you for shade. It's talking about in the future. It's talking about in the future. He's saying he's making a prophecy in the future. In the times of Mashiach, the Jewish people will live in such tranquility that they'll be able to have these booths that will give them shade from the heat of the day. Okay. Right? It's not talking about the halakhic aspect of what we're living in right now. Okay. It's purely talking about the future. Yeah. Third line of the Gemara says, "Ask the Gemara, Rabbi Zera." Okay, we've explained why we can't accept Rabbi Zera, and we can't accept Rabba. What's Rabbi Zera's objection to Rava and Rabba? Yeah. So answers the Gemara. Answers the Gemara. Imkain lema kara v'chuppah tiel etzel yomam. So Rabbi Zera, the Gemara, interestingly, he's asking Rabbi Zera to defend yourself. Defend yourself. Why are you saying that this is referring to? We can learn halacha from this pasuk. And he says, "Imkain lema kara chuppah." If you're going to say that all you're not talking about a sukkah that we're talking about, halachic sukkah. You're talking about merely a canopy. And in fact, the translation I found, I changed it to sukkah here. It has something like pavilion. They translated it as v'hasukkah ha'yisal l'tzel. The pavilion shall be for shade from the sun. Yeah? Yeah. So clearly the translator saw this wasn't talking literally about sukkah's mitzvah. It was talking about a type of structure that's in an awning or something that's made in order to provide you shade. I'm not talking about sukkah. So the Gemara says, so that's our problem. How do you know this is talking about a sukkah? So it says Rav Zera, if it wasn't, then let the pasuk use the word chuppah. We have other words that mean canopies. Yeah, we have other words that mean coverings. Chuppah, that we talk about a chuppah. Yeah, how do we find a chuppah? It's something open-sided with a covering over the top. Yeah, why doesn't the pasuk say the chuppah tiel itself? That you should have a canopy, you should have a pavilion. I put the word in here, but I said it should say pavilion or canopy. Yeah, if it meant just some sort of structure providing shade, then it should have used, instead of the word sukkah, it should have used the word chuppah. Why dafka does it use the word sukkah? So in Canaan said, if it's not talking about a sukkah, literally a sukkah, then let the posuk say chuppah, l'tzel yomam, to give you shade. Umay the sukkah tiel l'tzel yomam. And therefore, why does it say the sukkah tiel l'tzel? Why does it use the word sukkah? Shema mina tarte. In order that we can derive two things from it. First thing is that a sukkah, by definition, has to have shade. When we talk about sukkah, it means something something. Tzel is almost qualifying. Again, it's almost like an adjective. Sukkah means shade. When we talk about a sukkah, we're meaning a structure that provides shade. The second thing we learn from it is that the sukkah must have shade. It must be the schach that's providing the shade. Okay? Because we learned previously that when we talk about sukkah comes from schach. We derive, it's the schach that gives the sukkah its definition as a sukkah. Right? So those are the two things we're learning from it. If you just look, look at, if you've got Omid Aleph, go back to Omid Aleph, the Rabbeinu Hananel, talk about eyesight, but it's right at the bottom of the page. Look here, in the wide lines at the bottom of the page, underneath the Gemara. Yeah. It says Rabbeinu Hananel, it's 4 lines up from the bottom, middle of the line. Reb Zera Sukkah liyamos haMashiachu. So the challenge they made, that Rava made against Reb Zera, was that his posuk is talking about the future, the time of the Mashiach. Koloma Yeshivas Yisrael b'Shalva b'li Pachad, talking about, it means to say that when the Jewish people are dwelling in serenity without any worries, or afilu b'midbar b'makom she'ein sham lo choma v'lo ir, or you're talking even if they're in the desert, but there's no city or there are no walls, and there's nothing to worry about. There's no enemy to worry about. All the only thing they have to be concerned about is the heat of the sun, or the zerem, or from the rain. Zerem mitar, the sukkah letzel, and the sukkah is providing them with shades. And the covering is sufficient. And we say that sukkah letzel, meaning it means that they find themselves in a situation where you've got sufficient cover for whatever natural elements you need protection from. If that's either sun or rain, that's what the schach is giving you. But you can't suggest that we can learn from this halachas in relation to the sukkah itself for a mitzvah. Mishane Reb Zera, that's what Rabba and Rabba's objection was. Reb Zera answers, if that's the case, if you're going to say this is talking about just a structure which gives you shade from the elements, then lichtav chuppah beloshen kisu. That's what you're saying then. If you're going to suggest that posuk's talking about a type of structure that gives you shade and not a sukkah, you can't learn halacha from it, then let the posuk write a word like chuppah, which implies that. Beloshen kisui, which is the language of covering, only covering. Koloma, dava hamachase min hashemesh umin hamatar, which implies something which covers you over from the rain or from the sun, or from the precipitation. Amai kasiv beloshen sukkah. Therefore, why does the pasuk Davka use the word sukkah? It's a penultimate line on the page. Beloshen sukkah l'amdech ki gam sukkah shel mitzvah be'inen zeh hi mitzvah soy. It was encoded like a code. The Navi used the word sukkah on purpose in order to tell you not only is this predicting about the future, but it's also there in order so we can learn halacha from it in relation to the sukkah that we need for the mitzvah. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Do we Rashi on there? Tarti, we saw something. Yeah. Look at Rashi. The end of the 4th wide line of Rashi on the left-hand side. Tarti. So we says Rabbi Zera that we can learn 2 things from this pasuk. Te'ein shem sukkah el ha'asu l'tzel. First thing is that a sukkah only gets its name when it's made for shade. That's what we get. The sukkah chayit l'tzel, that tells us that it's we can only call it a sukkah if it's made in a way that it provides shade. If it doesn't have that, then it can't even be called a sukkah. And therefore, if it's higher than 20 amas, nothing doing. It's not a sukkah. How do we know that? Because he's saying that, yes, he says he's not actually disagreeing. He's saying because, how do we know? Because we say, the Pasuk is telling us, in the times of Mashiach, you will build structures which will give you shade. And what do we call them? Sukkahs. So therefore, you know that a sukkah has to be something which gives you shade. Otherwise, it can't be called a sukkah. And therefore, something which is not giving you a shade, and by definition, something higher than 20 amos can't give you shade, not a sukkah. Shalom. Yeah, that Hashem should, again, he should surround us, yeah. But we have made but that posuk doesn't make a connection between sukkah and sail. Rabbi David specifically is using that because we learn from this posuk that sukkah means sail. Yeah, it means shade. Without shade, it's not called a sukkah because you could have used the word chuppah.
Rabbi, do we not have a proof from Yonah? Because in Yonah it talks about sukkah, which gives shade, right? Like he needed that dafka for shade. Pardon?
Was it called? Remind me, was it called a sukkah?
I don't know. That's a very good question. In my head it is, but it might not be actually called a sukkah. I'm sure because he had the gourd, but then he also had a sukkah. I'm sure it was called a sukkah.
Well, it was the kikayon. It was the tree. That
No. It also talks about sukkah as well. It's not just the kikayon. I'm sure they built sukkahs in that time. In my head. Shall I look it up?
Yeah, you look it up. That's your homework. You may be
Thanks,
right.
Rabbi.
You may be right.
It might just be in my mind, but I'm an educator. What do I know?
No, you may have to say right, but the reason why Rabbi Zera possibly didn't choose that is because this posuk in Yeshayahu makes a connection between sukkah and sail. Yeah, which allows him to teach, which he needs in order to make that connection. Because what he's trying to do is he's trying to get to find the proof text. Remember what the Gemara said on Amud Aleph, after having asked why is our mission different to the mission in Reuven, it then goes and asks the fundamental question, which is where do we know that when the Mishnah says that a sukkah higher than 20 amos is possible, where do we know it from? Says Rabbah from this posuk, Kalaman Yedu, says Rabbah from Basukos Teishvu, and says Rabbi Zera from Vasukah Aisha Sale. Rabbi Zera will tell you that even though this posuk is talking about the future in times of Mashiach, nevertheless, it's the only posuk he could find which makes the connection between sukkah and sail, which allows us to define a sukkah as something which gives shade. If it doesn't give shade, it's not even called a sukkah. Nachon?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he did. I'm just looking it up. But anyway, yeah.
Okay. If you find the posuk in Yonah that says sukkah and sail, then we've got a big problem.
Okay, but fine.
I don't think you find it.
I see. No, I see. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
I get homework. It's good to keep me busy. Thank you, Rabbi.
Absolutely. It says you got holidays coming up. What will you do otherwise?
Absolutely.
I don't want you on the Xbox all the time.
Rabbi, you're always on holiday, you know.
Oh, you're breaking up, Johnny. You're breaking up. The connection's really bad here.
The reason why I'm too scared to come.
Very good. Okay. Where were we? Where are we up to? Okay, let's go back in the Gemara. Okay, end of the fifth line. Yeah. And then now we've got the next one. Karava nami lo amri. Now, Rabbah and Rabbi Zera also can't say like Rava. They can't hold like Rava. What's their objection? This time, Mishum Kusha da Abaya. This time it is because of the question that Abaya asked on it. Again, go back to Amud Aleph. What did Rava say? Basukos Teshvu Shivas Yamim. Towards the bottom of the page. He said it has to be a Diras Keva. Sorry, no, it has to be Diras Arai. It means it has to be only a 7-day structure, which implies only temporary. If it's built higher than 20 amos, that by definition has to be Keva, and therefore it's not Diras Arai. Says Amalei Abaya, this now 2, 4, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom of the Gemara. Amalei Abaya, Elamiata, based on what you just said then, Rava, that it has to be Arai. Asa Mechitzo Shel Barzel, this is the one. If you were to make your iron-walled sukkah, and then put the schach on it, below 20 amos, sukkah, that also wouldn't be a sukkah. If you're saying the definition of a sukkah is it has to be arai, it has to be temporary, it has to be a temporary structure, only a 7-day-old structure, only a structure that could only last for 7 days, then if you were to make the walls out of a permanent material, then you also wouldn't have a diras arai, a temporary structure, regardless of how high the schach is. Even if the schach was less than 20 amas. How did Rava answer that? Do you remember? So he said, I would say this to you. Adam diras arai. He would say, no, look, up to 20 amas. Even if a person was to make it permanent, out of bricks and mortar, out of metal walls, that's still considered to be temporary, as long as the schach is lower than 20 amas. Once the schach is 20 amas, even if you were to make it in a flimsy way, if you have to have very thin walls, but they're 20 amas high, that by definition is keva, is fixed, is permanent. Yeah. So, but as long as it's lower than 20 amas, however permanent the walls are, and we saw that in fact it would appear to Rava that actually ideally they should be permanent walls. They should be less than more than not flimsy. Yeah, they should be more substantial. Even if they're very substantial, even if they're there throughout the year, and Jeremy made this point last week, yeah. Even if the walls are there throughout the year, and all you're merely doing is putting the schach down onto it, it's fine, absolutely fine. But once you go above 20 amas, even if it was very flimsy material, that by definition has a permanence to it, and therefore no good. Okay. So now the question would be, why don't Rabba and Rabbi Zera accept that answer from Rava? They accepted it from Rabbi Zera when Rabbi Zera was challenged by a buyer about the Ashros Kanayim, about the mountains providing the shade. He gave a good answer. Why didn't they accept that answer? To Tosfos. Why don't they accept Rava's rebuttal? So says the Gemara. Where are we? Lo Amri Mishum Kusha Da'abaya. Actually, the Gemara doesn't tell us. Yeah, they accept the challenge of a buyer, and therefore they can't. They would say no. Because Teshuvah Shivas Jamim doesn't tell us, that doesn't qualify as sukkah, not telling us that it has to be arai. Yeah, they would say the purely defining feature is the schach 20 amas or not? Yeah, for other reasons. Look at Rashi. It's parallel with the second line of the Gemara. Mishum kusha Abaya to asa mechitza shel barzel. So Abaya said, well, what would happen if you were to make the walls out of metal? Vishinve lo mashmaluhu. And Rava answers him and says, it doesn't. You don't imply that, infer that from that. Hovukara lav davka arai nakat lo yalfinin minei shura. Although Rava has a good answer to a buyer, Rabba and Rabbi Zera don't accept it because they say, okay, you're suggesting that pasuk is telling us arai, but it's not clear in the pasuk from that. You've had to darshan it out to tell us, it's only a sukkah that can last for 7 days. But the pasuk has not been explicit enough to tell. You can't really, from this, define. It says here, lo yalfinen minei shiura. You can't derive from that pasuk what the shear it is. What is a shear of 7 days? How do you know that a 7-day sukkah is one which is less than 20 amas? You can't tell us that. Because our buyer's kasha is, the truth is, permanent walls made out of metal, as long as they're below than 20 amas, you'd say it's okay. Well, then what's the defining feature? The defining feature must be the height. You've got nothing that tells about height. Yeah? Whereas this one does. The man yedu, in order you should know, the only way to know is to be able to see it. 20 amas is too high. Here, let's sell, has to give you shade. The only way to give you shade is below 20 amas against the walls. This one doesn't help you. That can't answer. That pasuk can't be the source for why the Tanna Kama says that a sukkah which is higher than 20 amas is possible. Yeah. Okay, so that's why Rabba and Rabbi Zera can't accept Rabba. Now we've seen how all three can't accept each other. Yeah.
Rabbi, I've done my homework.
Oh yeah, go on. During class. Let's be in your own time zone. Oh my goodness.
Rabbi, it's called multitasking. Anyway, so we've got chapter 4. Vayetze Yona min ha'ir, vayeshev mikedem la'ir, vayas lo sham sukkah, vayeshev tachtecha batzel.
Top of the class, Johnny.
What do you think?
I'm very impressed.
There you go.
Very impressed.
So, I mean, do you want to read the English from what it says in Sepharia? Now, Jonah had left the city and found a place in the east of the city. He made a booth there and sat under it in the shade.
It's a good one. Okay. It's a good one. In the shade. Our pasuk says, "Our sukkah tiyeh litzel." Our sukkah shall be the shade, for the shade.
I mean,
That pasuk is not telling you.
I mean, that's just English. Ba is could be 4 in, surely. I mean,
Don't call me Shirley.
what do you think?
I told you what I just thought. It's a good one. Say the Hebrew again.
Vayetze Yona min ha'ir, vayeshev mikedem la'ir, vayas lo sham sukkah, vayeshev tachteha batzel, ad asher yireh ma yeh ba'ir.
So he sat underneath the sukkah in the shade.
Correct.
Maybe
the sukkah is there for shade.
The tree was
right.
The shade.
Where did he build it? Under the Kikayon, didn't he?
Yeah.
Well.
Oh yeah, no, thank you. So what happened?
Maybe.
What happens? Why does it? What happens? The Kikayon.
Yes.
Sukkah type structure, but it is under the tree.
Under the shade of the Kikayon. When the Kikayon
was live.
Yeah, died. Yeah.
When it died.
It died. Yeah.
Then
He cursed. What did he curse? He didn't curse his sukkah, didn't he? He cursed the Kikayon, didn't he?
Yes. But why is it called a sukkah? Why is it called a sukkah?
It's a booth. It's a booth.
It's not a canopy. So it's for the mitzvah of sukkah.
No, the point is, Rabbi Zera is using the posuk in Yeshayahu to tell us the definition of sukkah is sail. Yeah. You can't do that from your posuk.
It's pretty close though, Rabbi, isn't it?
I'm not denying it's pretty close. And I said to you, well done. It's not my machlokas, it's with you. It's with you with Rabbi Zera. I'm defending Rabbi Zera. Sure.
And when I see him next,
has a slightly better posuk. Oh, I'll tell you why it's even better. Because Rabbi Zera is from Navi and yours is from Ksubim.
You're suggesting it's fair enough. Mine's earlier.
Twice now.
Mine's earlier.
Yeah, but yours has less kedusha. Yours is Navi. It's a Navi. Yeah, you're right.
What do you mean?
You're right.
Mine's more.
It's a Navi as well. You're right. I'll take that back. But I still point out by the fact that it says he sat in the shade. It doesn't say in the shade of the sukkah. Yeah, well, it says the word sukkah though. It says the word sukkah.
Rabbi, you're being a bit shady. You're being a bit shady, Rabbi.
Yeah, very good, John. Let me do the jokes. But sukkah litzel. The sukkah shall be for the shade. Is the posuk in Yeshayahu, meaning.
I see. So it's more direct.
Yeah, I think so. Slightly. I mean, it's not much in it.
Not in there.
Well done.
Pleasure.
Okay, let's carry on. Says the Gemara. 6 lines down, end of the line, 2 words in. Come on, ask. Yeah. Now ask the Gemara. Who of these 3 Amoraim would go like who of their opinions would fit most with the opinions of Rav in these 3 different scenarios? Kaman Azla, how da Amar Rabbi Yoshia Amar Rav. Who would this statement of Rabbi Yoshia in the name of Rav go like? Machlokes b'shein defanos migius l'schach. Rav is saying, what is the source of the machlokes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah? Remember, Tanakama said, sukkah that's higher than 20 amos is possible. Rabbi Yehuda says, kosher. What's the source of the machlokes? Says Rav, machlokes b'shein defanos migius l'schach. The machlokas is the situation where the walls don't reach the schach. There's a gap between where the walls end and where the schach starts. Aval defanos migius l'schach. However, if the walls reach the schach, afilu mala me'esrim amma keshera. Even if the walls and the schach meet, even if the schach is higher than 20 amos, keshera, it's kosher. Kaman asked the Gemara, who's that go like? Look at Rashi. Kaman, first one, Kaman. Mehanach Amorai, de le'el azlahach. These three Amorayim, Rabba, Rabbi Zera, and Rava. Who do they go like? In Machlokas to Rabbi Yehuda V'Rabbanan, in our Mishnah between Rabbi Yehuda, so between the Chachamim, between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda. Says Rav, that's the situation is where the walls don't meet the schach. If the walls meet the schach, then even the Tanakama would accept that if the schach is higher than 20 amas, then it would be kosher. There would be no machlokas. Machlokas is only in the very limited scenario, which is, according to Rav, in the first situation, where the walls don't meet the schach. So answers Gemara, Karabba. It would be like Rabba. Yeah? Ta'ama mishum dolo shalta be'ene. Rabba says, based on the pasuk, Laman yedu doros echem ki basut go shafti. Yeah? You need to know that you're sitting in a sukkah. In what situation do you know you're sitting in the sukkah? When the schach is lower than 20 amas. But if it's higher than 20 amas, because your eyes don't look up that high, you don't know. Yeah? Ta'ama mishum dolo shalta be'ene. It says, because he says the eyes don't go that way. For given to Tefanos Migis the Schach, Mishlat Shalta Be'ene. But when the walls reach the Schach, then even Rabba would accept that your eyes would go up there, because what your eyes follow the wall. Right? You look up the wall and you look all the way to the upper top of the wall until it stops, and you see, oh, look, there's the roof there. But if there's a gap between the wall stops and then there's a gap and then there's a roof, you may not look further than the gap. You say, oh, that's the end of the walls. Yeah. So we could say that the machlokas in the Mishnah goes like Rabbah, which is that when it's only in the limited scenario. The machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda is when there's a gap between the schach and the walls. But they both agree that if there's no gap, even if the schach is higher than 20 amas, it's fine. Because Laman Yedu, the need to know, which we said is only below 20 amas, because it only goes that far. That's only when the walls don't reach the roof. But when the walls reach the roof, even higher than 20 amas is fine. That makes sense? Okay. Okay. Look at Rash. So look at Tosfos on the right hand side, the second Tosfos. The kiven the defanos megias l'schach mishlat shalta be'enei. Since the walls reach the roof, the schach, a person's eyes do run up the wall. But dami l'ner Chanukah v'koras mavoy. Remember, we talked on the first session. We talked about Tosfos brought the case of. Remember, we said the reason why the Mishnah just says posel and doesn't give a takanta is because sukkah is to oraisa, to Torah law, whereas mavoi, whereas the courtyard is to rabbanan. We quote Tosfos brought a case of another rabbanan where we do give a takanta about Ner Chanukah. Yeah. Ner Chanukah, we say that if a person places Ner Chanukah, lights Ner Chanukah above 20 amos, they've not fulfilled the mitzvah. Yeah, and we also said about in the Mishnah in Eruvin about the Korah. We said that Mavoi, in order, the Chachamim said that a Mavoi, that an alleyway that opens out to the Rosh Hashanah, they instituted it has to have either a lechi, either a post against the open-sided wall, the wall that opens out onto the main road, or you need to have a Korah, a beam going across, and that beam has to be lower than 20 amos. Because otherwise people don't look up and don't see it, and they don't know it's there. It's not acting as the hecker, it's not acting as the symbol or the sign that we're trying to make this into Rosh Hashanah. What does the Mishnah say in Ruvin? If it is higher than 20 amas, just reduce it, just bring it down. But we've still got the definition of 20 amas. So hold on a second. With a mavoi, the walls, the korah, the beam, is going to be sitting on top of the walls. So why don't we say, well, it doesn't matter if it's above 20? According to what we're saying here, as long as the walls reach the roof, you've got no problems. Even the Tana Kama in our Mishnah would say it's fine. So why doesn't the Tana in the Mishnah in Eruvin say if the walls of the alleyway touch the beam, which they will by definition, because the beam has to sit on something, if they're touching, even if it's above 20 amos, it's not a problem because your eyes follow the wall and you'll see the beam. So says Tosfos, and there, but yet we say that if the beam is above 20 amos, it's not considered to be a heka, something that can be seen, and therefore as a symbolic of it. Even though the beam is on the walls, so what's the problem? There he says, and there's a bit of a shvach answer, and we see what Ritva will say it's a bit shvach answer, and the another one. Tosfos says the reason why there with a mavoi it's still no good, even though the beam is touching the walls, is because the beam itself is just a tefach. It's very small. It's not very big at all. Yeah, tefach, right? And therefore, the person doesn't look all the way up there just to see a small plank of wood going across. To see a big roof, schach, people will look up. You'll carry on your eyes. Oh, what's up there? Keep looking. Oh, you'll see the schach. But to follow 20 amos all the way up just to see that little plank of wood going across, you're not going to do that. You're not going to do that.
Yeah, but you're thinking like that when you've got with an Eruvin, with the actual string. To know that you've got a kosher Eruv, you look up at the string or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And in that way, there's no walls there, but you'll look up instinctively to look up and see the thing. So What's the problem with the
right? So that you don't need to see it. The Chachamim didn't say you need to see the Eruv string. With a mavo, you need to see it because they were concerned that because you've got Rishus HaRabim and Rishus HaYachid, and the mavo is like an in-between the two, we need something to symbolize the fact that this is the end of the Rishus HaYachid, now's the beginning of the Rishus HaRabim. We're not doing it with that. We're not doing it with the Eruv. It's not quite the same. Okay. Okay. So it ends off and says, "Kamo b'sukkah." So last with Rashi, sorry, Tosfos, "Kamo b'sukkah the rachava tuva." It's not the same with the sukkah, which has a certain width to it. The schach is going to have a certain, especially the schach that's 20 amos high, is going to have a certain height to it. Going to have a certain width to it, and therefore it's something worth looking up to, right? Whereas that's not the case with the beam on the mavoi, on the alleyway. I said that there's not such a great answer. In fact, the Ritva gives an alternative. I'll find it. Yeah, come on. So it says here, "Perish love mishum dahashta the tefanos megis l'schach minei beitfei." He says it's not the fact that the walls reach the schach and therefore it's more visible. Tahamai the two hare mavusha tefanos megis l'koire the pasli le mishum deleka hekira. Because otherwise, with our mavoi, we've got the beam up there. That should be okay, and yet we say it's not good enough. You'd have to reduce it. And he says it's a bit of a stretch to answer, like as Tosfos does, that the difference between what we've got with schach and there with the beam is only a tefach, and it's not really anything noticeable. He says the truth is, the real answer is this: that even though the normal way is that above 20 amos the eyes don't reach, here with the sukkah it's something different. Here, because for sukkah to be kosher, you have to have at least 2 full walls and a third of at least a tefach. But tefanos megis the schach, and the walls, those 2 and a bit walls, reach all the way to the schach. And when you're sitting in it, you're acutely aware that you're surrounded by these very high walls, substantial walls, at least 2 and a bit very substantial walls. Then it's quite clear that you are surrounded and covered. In that scenario, it's impossible for you to think that you're not covered by the schach. He says, put that in the the difference between being in an alleyway with a beam over 20 amas high is that you're not really aware that you're surrounded on all sides. Yeah, you've got 2 main walls. Yeah, the alleyways is divided into 2 walls. Yes, obviously it's closed at one end, but you're way away from that end. You're at the open end. So you've got 2 walls, then an opening out into the street. We can't really expect you above 20 amas to look up and see a thin bit of wood up there and say, oh yeah, now I realize I'm actually enclosed. But when you're in a sukkah, where you've got 2 and a bit solid walls around you, you're enclosed, and your eyes run up the wall, you're going to see the schach there. It's impossible you're not going to be aware that you are covered by the schach. And therefore, for that reason, that's the distinction between here and there. Does that make sense? Yeah, that makes sense? So according to Rabba, Tanakama Chachamim would agree that if the walls reach the schach, even above 20 amas, it would be a kosher sukkah. Because we just need you to know that you are covered by schach. And when the walls reach the schach, since according to the Ritva, the walls are substantial, and yet it's impossible for you not to know that you're going to be covered by schach, then you fulfill that obligation, that requirement. The only time they would disagree is when the walls don't reach the schach. It's a very limited scenario. Okay. I'll carry on a bit more. That's the first question. Next question asks the Gemara. We are now 12 lines down, 3 words in. First word on the line is the word bay, eine. Then we got the word command. Command azat hadza amarav huna amarav. Who of the 3, Rabbi Zera, and Rava, would, in their opinion, most fit into this? Where Rav Huna says in the name of Rav, Machlokas b'she'ein ba ela arba amos ala arba amos. If we were to suggest that machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda is in a situation where the sukkah is only daled amos by squared, 4 amos by 4 amos. Yeah. Yeah. Aval yesh ba yotem arba amos ala arba amos. Yes. So in a sukkah where you can probably work this out yourself because we talked about it last time. Who is it most like of these 3? If we're going to say the scenario that the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda are disagreeing on is where the sukkah is only 4 by 4 amas and 20 amas high, what would the problem be in that scenario? If it's a very small sukkah with very high walls, lack of shade, brought by the schach, the shade is coming from the walls. So it's going to be this one, isn't it? It's going to be Rabbi Zera. Yeah. I feel however, aval yesh ba me'arba aval yesh ba yotem me'arba amos ala arba amos. However, but in a scenario where the sukkah is bigger than 4 by 4, I feel ama kashera. Even if then the schach is higher than 20 amas, it's kosher. Everyone will say it's kosher. Command, who's it go like? Rabbi Zera. He goes like Rabbi Zera. Yeah, Da'ama Rabbi Zera, Da'ama Mishum Sel, who says that the reason why a sukkah higher than 20 amas is possible is because you need the sukkah to give you shade. It has to be the sukkah that gives you shade, not the tree, Johnny. Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi, for clarifying that.
Just checking you were still there, Johnny. Just checking.
Always wide awake, Rabbi.
Good. I couldn't hear the chewing. Huh? Yeah. It's by 6 by 6 foot, isn't it? 6 foot by 6 foot.
Yeah.
It's not tiny, but 20 to 30 foot walls compared to 6 foot square. Yeah. Yeah. You're right. It's not tiny. It's not tiny, but once those walls are 30 foot, I mean, again, you have to work out your angles. You need to know your trigonometry, right? That if the walls, I say, if the walls are 5 times the height of the width of the sukkah, then it's going to be the walls giving you shade, and not the schach. And that's the point. So although it's not about the sukkah being tiny, it's about the fact that the ratio between height and width is such that 20 amas high, you're going to be getting the shade from the walls, not from the schach. Yeah. However, once you go beyond that, once the ratio is less than 5 height to width, then everyone would agree that it's going to be the schach giving the shade, and not the walls. Now you could argue, and we see the Ritva brings it down. I think Tosfos also brings it down. It's a bit of a stretch argument. Why? Because you're going to suggest that 6 foot 2 inches is enough of a change of ratio that now 20 amas high is going to not give you the shade from it's going to give you shade from the schach. But we have to have a line. Yeah. Do you understand the question? Does everyone understand what I'm saying? Hello? Yeah. I was going online now.
Yes, Rabbi.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so it's a bit strange to say that, but everything has to have a shear, right? So we're saying that the minimum shear the point where we would say is about the ratio. If the ratio is 5 height to width, then it's going to be the walls giving the shade no good. Once the ratio is anything less than 5 to height to width, then we'd say, okay, even if the schach is 20 amas even higher, because it says, I feel you go even further.
The argument then is you have a bigger sukkah, you can
have
higher wall.
Yeah, but worse than that, what it just says by this is once you've got daled amas by daled amas and a bit more, so you've got 6 foot 2 inches, you can then go to 40 feet. But then, but no, it doesn't seem to say that. Look, he says, I feel them. Look, he says, Aval yesh ba yotem aba amas al aba amas. I feel lemala mesrim ama. Not when it's then at 20 amas, it's okay, but even more than 20 amas. Yeah. But again, the defining feature is once you've got the floor space of daled amas and a bit more, then we seem to say the ratios goes out the window. Yeah,
it's the tipping point. It's the tipping point when it becomes an actual structure type thing. Like
by definition, we're saying
yeah.
Even though in reality it could actually still be the walls. Yeah, because again, remember what we said last time. We said at Sukkot's time anyway, however low your walls are, however low down the schach is, the likelihood is at certain points during the day, if the wall's giving you the shade anyway, because the sun is always going to get under the schach. There's very small window of opportunity in a day in autumn, winter time, where the sun is going to be high enough in the sky actually to penetrate through the schach and not through the walls. So that makes sort of sense. So we have to say there's a cutoff point, a minimum cutoff point, and anything beyond that, then yeah, even though the reality doesn't seem to fit with the trigonometry, if that's the right thing, we have to accept it. And we see, therefore, that's clearly to do with the Rabbi Zera. Okay. Any rushing on that? Mishum sale. You could sell. One second. I feel I'm a Kashera Kaman, who's going to Rabbi Zera. I'm a Mishum sale who look at Rashi. The Mishum Mishlat Eine Bitfei Medalet Amos Purtolo Lord Shalta Bene. He says you can't say it's any of the others because it's not about raising your eyes up, because we've already said that we've already agreed that as long as the walls are touching, then it's fine. It must be for a different reason. Says. Yes, Sosa says the same thing. Yeah, the width is irrelevant for Rabbi Zera, who says it's all about the shade. It's irrelevant to him how big the floor space of the sukkah is, because he's only cared about is it the schach that's giving you the shade. Dam mishum sel who the kiva and the richa. And here, since the sukkah is spacious, we're not worried how high the schach is. Ikka sel sukkah. It's the shade of the sukkah which defines it, says the Gemara. Okay, one more. You do one more. Says Gemara. Kaman azla. Hada amar Rav Chanan bar Rabba. Amar Rav. So whom of our three would fit with what's been said by Rabba in the name of Rav? Machlokes b'she'ena mechazekes ela kadei rosho v'rubo v'shulchanoi. If we were to say the machlokes between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda is to do with this: if the sukkah is so small that it cannot fit, it can only fit a person's head, majority of their body, and their table. And again, I think the Ritva explains that we're talking about here when they used to recline. Yeah, they used to recline to eat. So we're talking about the table was put next to them, so that there'd be two spaces. That had to be enough space for the body lying down and a table lying next to them, which would be different to how we would be, because we would be sitting up, and so our body and where we were sitting on our table would be the same thing. So here we're talking about it has to be enough width of the sukkah to fit that in. So if you only got a sukkah that can only fit that minimum in, so that's the machlokas. It's such a small space. Aval mechazekes yotem mikadei rosha v'ruba v'shulchanoi afilu l'mala me'esrim amma k'sheira. But if it can accommodate more than just the person's head, majority of their body, and their table, then even more than 20 amas, we would say that it would be kosher. There'd be no machlokas between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda. Kaman, who does that go like? Rabba, Rabbi Zera, or Rava? Take your pick.
Process of elimination.
Yeah, you would think, wouldn't you? Have we done this one? We've done this one. We've done this one. You'd think it's Rava. Gemara's ahead of you. Says Gemara, the lo kechad. It's like none of them. Yeah. Look at Rashi. You see in the Rashi. So if you look on the right hand side where Tosfos is, the fourth Tosfos Karebi, and then go across the left, and you've got command de lo kechad. Mehanach, not got any of these. De le'el. Mefarashi time to esrim amma. So these three explanations why you can't have more than 20 amas don't seem to fit with any of this at all. Mishum, sorry, esrim amma. Di mishum mishrat eine. Because if you're going to say it's about looking upwards, Rabba. Even if you had more space inside for a person's head, body, and table, you still wouldn't necessarily look up. V'tseil, and when it comes to offering shade, like Rebbe Zera, Leica, there isn't. Yeah. And then with Rava, who requires it to be fixed walls, arai, temporary. Also, it'd still be an issue even if the walls would fix. We still have a question on it. It is Rashi. Look at Rashi. Let's look at the next Rashi. Rosho v'ruboi, his head and his body, majority of his body. Derech sudasan v'hesiba. The way they used to eat was reclining. Hayas al mitos musubin al sad smolam. They would recline on couches on their left-hand side. And they wouldn't eat sitting up like we do. Therefore, it has to say head and majority body. In order to exclude a very small sukkah or a very small person who could completely get his head in, get his head and his table in, but not his majority of his body. Or rosha v'rubo v'lo shulchano, or you can get his head and the majority of his body in, but not his table. Look at Tosfos. It's the fifth Tosfos, Kaman, on the right hand side. Kaman de lochad. V'divrei Rav Chanan bar Rabba tzrichi taima. Says Tosfos, we need a reason. What's this reasoning behind Rabbi Chanan bar Rabba saying you need a sukkah has to be big enough that you can get a person's head, majority of the body, and their table in. Some say the reason is because if it's so small, so it's 20 amas high, but very very narrow. He said it looks like a chicken coop. I don't know what chicken coop looks like. Presumably it's quite tall and thin.
Longer.
Yeah, longer thin. Maybe so. It's longer thin, but it's turned on its head, right? So it's very strange proportions. It's out of proportion, basically. Yeah, it doesn't look like a sukkah, the dwelling. It looks like a chicken coop. Since it's very high but very narrow. Aval like kuri sukkah. But once it's big enough to at least accommodate head, majority of the body, and table, then it's no longer seen as a chicken coop, and it can be called a sukkah. So this is about definition. What can you call a sukkah? Only something which, and again, we said it's like this idea. It's almost like this one, teshvu kein kadura, but we'll see later on in the Gemara, this idea of dwelling in a sukkah as you would in your home, meaning you have to be able to dwell in it. Meaning it has to be of a minimum size that you can actually dwell in it. Not that you're lying in your bed and your feet are sticking out the window, right? It's that's not a house, right? They used to have those like pods in Japan, those sleep pods, right? They're like literally tiny little things. You can't call that a house, right? You're cooped up. That's where we get the term from. Cooped up, right? That's where it comes from, clearly. Yeah. So, but it doesn't seem to fit with any of these. This is not a very narrow sukkah. Is not an issue of leman yedu. A very narrow sukkah is not a problem with the shade, and very narrow sukkah is not a problem of being arai. So there's none of these three. So it's a completely separate reason. So this must be the reason. It doesn't have the name of a sukkah because it's like a chicken coop. Yeah, it's okay for chickens, but it's not okay for humans. Okay. Okay, we're going to leave it here. Gemara is now going to say that we have to try and understand these three machlokas. And again, almost try and say, why do we have to have all three of them? Where two of them, almost like why I got three of these, two of the machlokas we had were about shear, about size. One wasn't. Why? Therefore, why do we need all three of these? And what's the relation between them? Where two of them come to begin shear, and the other one doesn't. Okay, so we'll see that next time. Okay, thank you, everyone.